Hey guys, welcome back then. So here we're going to go through a little bit about how to really kind of get your CV and cover letter in a place where it's almost impossible not to be shortlisted for that role. So what we're going to do is we'll go through some of the essentials. So what we'll do is we'll look a little bit in and around sort of what to include and what not to include in your CV and cover letter and some of those key do's and don'ts. The ideal is that we stand out, isn't it? So how are we going to do that? So that initial impression and what key information and how we structure that is super important. For me, as someone who picks up a lot of applications, the design and the aesthetics is often one of the first things that you kind of see. So it's that kind of walking into a bar scenario and noticing people who stand out, all that kind of thing. So what is the format? What is the layout? You can use things like Canva and AI, obviously, to kind of get it looking really, really nice very, very quickly. In relation to your cover letter, it's really important to make sure that it's bespoke to that role. You can do a generic cover letter, but the more specific it is to the demands and the specifics of that job, the more that person's going to relate when they pick it up. So those key traits, how do you apply that directly to that role, and how do you match your own person and job spec? In terms of references, again, you might be asked to provide some character references. You don't necessarily have to do that at this stage, but have a little think about who and why you're picking them. Are they credible? How does it kind of add to your application? And obviously just make sure that you ask them for permission before you do it. Now, in terms of where we are at the start of your journey, you're all going to be at different points, aren't you? So it's not always the same case that everybody is going in as a new graduate with the same amount of experience. When you were a student, you will know that there were mature students, there were people who were fresh out of uni, but lots of that kind of experience that you bring and life qualifications and experiences and different traits can put you in different positions. Now, you can't control any of where other people are, but what's really important is for you just to kind of recognize what your starting point is and also not to underplay how far you've come to get into this position. Because sometimes what we do is if we're kind of going up a ladder or whatever, you sort of see the top bit, don't you? You're there on the day, but actually you haven't seen the journey, all of the qualifications or the extracurricular things that you've done or the common interests that you might have, but what sets you potentially aside from other people that gives you that little extra edge. So again, don't underplay your things that you need to work on, but certainly look and highlight some of those strengths that you have in what you're bringing. Because everyone's aware, aren't they, that you're not the total package all the time. So I would far rather have someone who was really keen, really motivated, showing lots of willingness, showing that introspection that you require, and that motivation to get better than someone who was kind of maybe a little bit further ahead, but were like, I'm at the end, I'm not interested in kind of taking on any responsibility, not going above and beyond, and not having that same passion and desire, because in that team that can have a massive knock-on effect in terms of kind of what's going on. There's that classic one, isn't there? There's all you need is one bad apple to kind of spoil a crumble kind of thing. And it is really important to be aware of your strengths as well, because I think what the classic thing is when you start comparing yourself to who else will be in the room and what you're lacking, it can certainly come across in that negative way. Yes, there might well be some areas that you need development in, but don't forget to highlight what you bring to the table, where you've come from and the journey that you've gone on. The other thing that's really nice to look at is also where are you going? So where do you see yourself in a year, in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? And if you can make it relevant and look like you're showing longer term commitment, that's obviously kind of a really positive factor. This journey can also, by answering these questions yourself, can actually start to work out whether or not this is actually you and where you feel like you fit in the world. So, in terms of kind of setting off on this journey, this is just quite a nice analogy that I kind of came up while putting all this together. Obviously, you've got different people starting at different points, but the stage that they cross that final finish line can be very different, can't it? So you might well have someone with a lot more experience, a lot more qualifications. That's going to put them ahead of you, probably. But what else do you bring? What are some of those maybe more softer skills that you potentially can offer? What's kind of a little bit unique? So not just the qualifications, not just the kind of theoretical sides, but your attitude, your personality, remembering to smile and enjoy that process and make yourself look like you want to be someone who they're going to want to work with. So just straight on to the CV itself now, really. So what do you guys need to include on that journey? So clearly you need to have the information about yourself. So your name, your contact information is really important. I would do a very short sort of personal statement on here. So really succinct, maximum a paragraph, but something that just really kind of talks to the person and highlights your writing style, what you're into, what you bring, and why you'd be a good fit for this role. We'll talk about a longer personal statement later on, but I do think it's nice to have a little personal touch that you have there that builds a bit of connection. Have you tailored your CV and that personal statement to this role? Because if you, again, just say, I want a job as a physiotherapist or in teaching or wherever it may be, then actually maybe change it to, I want a specific role within this environment because blah, blah, blah. The next stage is to kind of go through your skills and what you bring to the table, and that also kind of blends into your sort of current and previous employment or experiences that you have. So what are probably the absolute key parts of that role that you will bring and carry into this environment that will benefit the employer from there? Now, you'll also have probably picked up a few other qualifications, even if it's CPD that you've been doing on the Grow Physio Academy or elsewhere, any extra courses that you've done. These are all nice ways to really highlight why you want this role. So it's a storyline that leads into it. Are you motivated over the last few months or years to build up to this moment? Have you been consistent on that journey? And again, what's worth doing is just making sure that you kind of put in there a little character references, usually on request, and what their positions are, and then make sure that you go through your CV. So triple check for any sort of mistakes, check the requirements that are on the job application or the job specification form, and make sure you're hitting all of those areas. So in terms of kind of the contact information, if we just go through each stage step by step, really. So you're going to put your name, your address, your contact information on there, what your title is, what your profession is. It's probably going to be physiotherapist or sports therapist. I quite like a picture, but try and make it relatable. So this one here, where he's kind of looking a little bit moody, I wouldn't necessarily would fit great. But if you've got a picture of you potentially working for a team or in an environment treating somebody, as long as they're not identifiable, then grand. But yeah, try and be in a uniform of some sort that kind of depicts the kind of role so they can see that relatability. This bit's a bit optional, really, but if you have got a website, you've got any kind of social media handles that you think are professional, not your own personal one if you're going on stag and hen do's and things like that, but if there's a professional site that you use, then I would say include it. So this is just an example of one, I think, quite nice looking, appealing CV. It's obviously in all the Grow Physio colours, which makes it great. I think the layout's really nice and clean. It's easy to read. The font and colour schemes are all great. They've separated it, I think, really nicely to kind of have a left-hand side that's those skills and qualities. And I quite like that top bit with the languages. So if you do have an additional language, again, this person's fluent completely in English, probably about 2/3, say, fluent in Spanish. So again, they're little nice tips. You could add other things and make that a little bit more applicable to physiotherapy if you wanted to. And then you'll see there at the top, he's kind of got his profile. That's his description of what he's bringing to the table, his past employment and current employment, and then what his education's been from there. There is a little section that you could kind of utilize in that bottom left-hand corner. Again, depending on where you're applying to, it might be that you put in a little bit of something that's a bit more applicable. This is just another example of another kind of template that you can sort of see, again, yanked from Canva, but it lays it out similarly. Bit more of a grey kind of scale look to it. Again, quite professional. This one includes a photograph, which again, I think is quite nice. But it does have some spelling mistakes on there. So just again, triple check if you look at achievement, they've spelled achievement wrong. Little things like that might well bug people. So run the spell check, get someone else to have a little look at it, look at the kind of layout, make sure everything's all aligned really nicely. And it's really easy to do, guys. So this was kind of my CV back in the day where it was just a standard Word document. I banged it into Copilot just on Word and just said, come out with some colour schemes, make things a green for the titles, and also kind of make the subheadings orange. And it kind of kicked this out, and then I uploaded a photograph, and this is what it spat out. So I think it looks a lot more appealing. And again, it's really simple, really easy to kind of spruce that up. These are just another classic kind of go-to. So if you have access to Canva, lots and lots of different templates that you can use. Again, different color schemes that you can change as you wish. The one on the left hand side has a lot more information in it, but I think I like the way that it's laid out on the right hand side a little bit more. I think the picture is a little bit more appealing, isn't it? It shows a bit more friendliness, appealingness. It shows that she's still professional, whereas on the left hand side looks a bit more moody. The layout of the contact information is just a little bit different. And again, it doesn't have any of that about me on the right-hand side compared to the left. So I think I like and more kind of appealing towards the colour schemes of the right one, but the content that's on the left one is a little bit better. So the other thing you have to make sure is super easy is that whoever picks your CV up can find the information really, really quickly. So that initial impression, as we've talked about, the aesthetics, the grammar and the layout, really important. But the key bits are, do you fit the criteria? So there might be specifics in that job specification or that person specification that you have to have, often known as the essential criteria. So the qualifications, the skills and the experiences that you have, make sure you're including them and making it really easy to find. It's also really important that you make it comparable to the role that you're applying for. So when you give examples of patients you've worked in, different roles you've had, responsibilities, how does that specifically apply to the role that you're applying to? Because actually there are some transferables, but can you make it really specific to this role? The other thing is it makes you, as a reader, know that the person filling this in is aware of that job role. So have they mapped to that job specification? And can you have anything on there? Maybe one little thing that really stands out and try and draw attention to that. Have you done a great achievement somewhere? Have you got a qualification that no one else will have? Have you had an experience working at even volunteering at a Commonwealth Games or an Olympics or something like that? Because what we don't want to have is the situation on the right-hand side where we've got Rafiki just going, right, we're about to launch you onto the next stage, but you haven't got what you require. You haven't got the evidence to prove that you do it. And it's a very easy one when there's a lot of applications to just throw that and reject that application based on that CV. Okay, so then let's have a quick look at the cover letter overview. So we're going to go through ideas and brainstorming tips for you. What is the 3-part structure that you'll go through just to try and make sure you cover all bases? How you can show passion and commitment to the interview panel. Think of those relatable examples and how you weave them into your cover letter. And then again, that aesthetics and layout might just be the final icing on the cake. So in a real simple way, the what is the job role? Are they aware of that? How are you going to fulfill the requirements of that role? And then why should you be that person who they employ, and make it really obvious that that's what sets you aside? Because when there's a lot of people in the room, you need to have something that's going to make you stand out and be memorable. And it might be just that big smile, that big personality, that kind of real enthusiasm to do it, because everybody in that room is going to want to make sure that they get the role. And often it's just that demonstration of all those skills and making it really clear that that's what you require. So I'd say the first thing to do really is if you find this kind of role that you think, oh, this is a bit of me, and you've read all the kind of requirements, just go through these 3 stages. So why do you want this job? That's going to be the classic reason and the first question in interview. So you need to have a really clear answer for that. What are your strengths? Why is this the role that you want right now? The other thing is, why is it this organisation or this sports team in particular that you're applying to? And we'll go through some of those reasons in a bit. It might be that there's certain personalities in that team, certain injuries that you want to see more of. You've got a special interest in a certain aspect. You love the way that the MDT is all brought together, the way they portray themselves, their ethos, whatever it may be. Try and get that across in that cover letter. And then why are you the best fit for that role? So this is just an example really of my first job that I applied for at Connect Health, who are now known as Cora Health, in MSK, working in primary care, so in GP practices. And again, what was the appeal? So why Connect? Why this role? And why do I want this now? So it was an area that I'd already developed skills in my previous job as someone who was operating autonomously as a physio and became head of CPD. But having the wider scope to apply this and access some of those experts was a real big appeal to Connect. So I've kind of proven I've done this already, but what I want to do is kick on, and there's a lot that this job will still offer me. There was something called an accelerated development program. For a year, we spent a full day working on CPD and working through this program. So it was an opportunity to wholeheartedly commit, learn a lot, more so than I would have done normally, see a whole range of different pathologies. There was an ability to grow within the company. Again, I could go on to team leader roles, clinical specialist roles, work in private healthcare, occupational health at the time. So it was showing an understanding of that company. It was a recognition-based point system that they ran. So we had a system where you got rewarded for certain things that you did really, really well. And actually your pay kind of linked in with that. So it was for those motivated individuals. There was also a personal recommendation. I was playing football with someone who worked for Connect. I'd asked him a lot about what the role was, so I had a nice little insight, and I'd recommend doing the same. I knew that it was the largest independent provider of MSK and primary care privately. So that was, again, massive insights. It was really well established, close relationships with GPs, and also it had a really innovative approach. So I was aware that they were leading on this sort of telephone triage, which at the time probably seems part and parcel now, along with video consultations. But this was really kind of state-of-the-art stuff. So we'd screen everybody, give them advice, give them guidance, bring them in, signpost them to A&E, rheumatology, or wherever. Now, this is also something that's worth just having a little insight into and thinking about some of maybe those less desirable things that other people don't want, but why do you not mind that happening? So that greater awareness of those can help you kind of cope with those scenarios. So the hours and the travel, so it was often traveling around different GP practices to find one to kind of cope with the demands. Again, I had capacity to cope with that. I had my own car, my own driving license, and didn't mind doing that. There was GPs practices which don't generally have great facilities in terms of rehab, but I was adaptable. I could fit into that scenario, be creative, be innovative with my rehabilitation. Appointment times, this was another bugbear of these, so new versus review times. So how would I cope with that? So I'd have better clinical reasoning and set those expectations with the patients a little bit earlier. There was often challenges of new injuries and conditions, so I might not have been exposed to it, but I was flipping that as an opportunity to learn and develop in these areas. Job security, again, there was kind of question marks about some places have sort of a 6-month or even 12-month probation period, but I wanted to kind of counteract that by going, you know what, I'm super motivated, I really want to impress, and go from there. I was already sort of working autonomously and alone in clinic, but some people see that as a bit of a downside because you're not in an environment where there's lots of physios and medics to tap into. So I was aware that I needed to get that supervision and be proactive in asking for help. And again, telephone triage had a bit of bad press at the time. People wanted to see everyone face to face, but how could we upskill our evidence base and it would improve my sort of subjective skills and patient mileage. And I think the general sort of vibe that you want to go with is this really, just make sure that when you're applying, that this is your number one option. This is where you want to work. This is where you want to develop and grow into. Because, as Maya Angelou said, never make someone a priority when all you are to them is an option. So if they know that you've got multiple different applications going in and this isn't exactly where you want to be, you might well dilute some of the benefit that's there. So these are some of the sort of headlines of things that I just sort of went away and thought about. So when I looked at the appeal of the role and the staff and the athletes, I'll let you guys read all of these really. But again, where do I bring some of those valuable experiences from? examples of applying the skill set that I'd done in the past. So where had I applied it? What were the scenarios? What had I learned through reflection? How would I apply this to the role? So specifically taking all of that learning from and life experiences and applying that into this. And then how would I demonstrate that I'd kind of shown that enthusiasm, and what are my values and my kind of ethos really? So jotting all this stuff down, you can obviously bang this into somewhere like ChatGPT to condense it. And what often kind of comes out from there is a really nice succinct version of this. So just make sure that you're opening up with a nice kind of opener that you can see on the right hand side really. Thank you for considering my application for the role of at wherever. And then this role would bring the opportunity for me to apply my expertise and experience from previous. Again, you're kind of going into some of the clinical examples, some of the qualifications. You're just fluffing out a lot of those kind of CV big hitters that you're going to, and then why you really want this role and what you're going to bring to the table. So it's that little unique opportunity to build that connection with the audience. So, well done. That is this section done. Get on with kind of compiling some of those notes and ideas. Use that AI best that you can to kind of make it a little bit better. Make sure it doesn't sound though like you've just been using AI. And if you've got any questions, then hit me up at steve@growphysioacademy.com, and I'll see you in the next stage where we start to look at more of the interview questions and once you've been shortlisted and what that means. So I'll see you then.